Good evening, class. Before we start, we have a question. Under departmental undertakings, we had written that they are controlled and financed as any other government department. Any other government department mean here, what is the difference between government, company and departmental undertakings? See, departmental undertakings are 100% under the control of the government, just like a department of their ministry. Just like other government department means a ministry has many departments under it. So the way they are running their departments completely financed by their budget, similarly is your departmental undertaking run. Example, railways, posts. These are departmental undertakings. Government companies are those which are government ownership is more than 51%. 51% से ज़्यादा stake है government का. But it could be other stakeholders also. And it is registered under the Companies Act. It has more degree of freedom as compared to a departmental undertaking. Departmental undertaking is like a government department only. But government company registered under the Companies Act, government ownership is more than 51%. It can take its own decisions independently. I hope it is clear. Now we were discussing the Industrial Policy Resolution 1991. Any doubts from the previous class? Sorry. Any doubts from the previous class? Today we will complete this Industrial Policy Resolution 1991 and then we will continue with the small sector enterprises. After that we will do National Manufacturing Policy 2011 and Make in India. Time बचा तो इनका evaluation भी. But mostly we'll be doing Industrial Policy Resolution. Do you have any doubts from the previous class? Okay, I'll give you a brief overview so that this, we had already discussed few of this. I'll still start with an overview. National Logistics Policy. See, we'll be covering the major ones. Logistics policy is easy to understand, you don't have to. Next week से आपको offline start है. Yes, next week से I think RB 1, 2 both are coming offline. 3-4 class हमारी है next week. We'll end the topics. See, before 1991, most of it was being done by the PSUs. 1948 and 56 we have seen. 1948 and 1956 we have seen that your public sector units are dominant. Most of your industrial activity is being done through the PSUs. Private sector minimally allowed. Both in the IPR 1948 and 1956 gave this only. See, before 91 majority of your policy was coming from your 1956 only. Jo improvement bhi the for subsequent reforms such as in IPR 1980, but overall the policy remained the same. What was under the IPR 1956? Majority of your industrialization was happening through your public sector. Public sector PSU dominance. There was a system of licenses. We discussed this under the Industrial Development and Regulation Act 1951. Sorry. Licenses controlling everything, how much you can produce, how much raw material, supply, everything. This is your license quota permit Raj. The 3 major regulations, the IDR 1951, the MRTP Act, and control over your foreign investments and foreign industries through FERA. What do you want to discuss on buffer stock? See, buffer stock is a simple concept that you need to have certain buffer for emergency. And also when market is facing supply shortages, you can liquidate your buffer stock. हमने बहुत ज्यादा बफर बना लिया procurement करके, that is it. License quota permit Raj, we have discussed Industrial Development Regulation Act 1951, the MRTP Act, which was to increase competition, monopolies control करने के लिए. This is Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act to ensure there is competition in the market. MRTP companies, earlier the limit was 20 crores, it was then extended to 100 crores. And for these MRTP companies, these companies had to take permission for any expansion, for any taking up mergers, acquisitions, anything, all permissions through the government. Both online, offline, सिर्फ offline नहीं हो रहा, both online, offline. And FERA, this was heavy restrictions on your foreign investments. Foreign Exchange Regulation Act on foreign investments, use of forex, heavily curtailed. So this is your regime pre-91. And this we have discussed in the industrial structure when we were evaluating that this system has led to massive underutilization of capacity. इसका क्या implication था? The implication of this whole system, massive underutilization. Losses in PSUs. जहां welfare orientation वहां नहीं था, वहां पे भी there were so many losses being faced by the PSUs. Poor pricing strategy, we discussed this in detail. Poor pricing strategy, they were not able to get out their money from the business. Loss making PSUs. You had high cost, low quality products. Inefficiencies in the market, industrial sickness. Minimal private sector and foreign investments. Not only you were facing issues in the supply side, as in PSUs were facing losses. PSUs were facing losses, but also your consumer base was getting substandard products. एक ही गाड़ी मिल रही है, ambassador, bread एक है, घड़ी एक है. There was no, you can say, competition in the consumer sector. You only had few goods available because most of your industrialization was being done through the PSUs. Massive underutilization of capacity, poor quality infrastructure. This we have all written. This we have already discussed. I'm just giving you a brief overview that what exactly led to the 91 policy. Now problem, this was the problem in the industries. We've discussed when we were discussing industrial structure between 1951 to 91. Also compounded with the problems of your economy, huge fiscal deficits. We discussed in the last phase before 91 that we were doing a lot of investment, lot of public expenditure, but backed by what? All borrowings, heavy borrowings by the government. There was inflation, imports were rising, you did not have money to pay. On top of this, you have political instability. तो आपका 1991 crisis है. See, we'll discuss this, all this in planning. FERA also we'll discuss in planning because FERA has not much of the implications in, say, industrialization, but for a normal economy as a whole, the use of foreign exchange was regulated by FERA. We will discuss it in planning. अभी यहाँ पे सब डिस्कस हो जाएगा, प्लानिंग में कुछ नहीं बचेगा. So FERA we will discuss it in planning. Also all this we will discuss in planning. Pichla wala slide, this we have already discussed. I'm just giving you a brief overview what is happening in industrial policy 91, why was it required. Top of that, Gulf War, imports all the more expensive. Then you had disintegration of USSR. This led to your 1991 BOP crisis. And this led to your LPG reforms. Also this was part of your IMF conditionalities. IMF ने loan दिया. Loan was contingent on bringing out reform measures. This is the context. LPG reform, one of the major reform measure is Industrial Policy Resolution 1991, opening up the industry. Majorly, this is what liberalization was. Even privatization of public sector was included a part of this. But privatization and disinvestment we'll again do in planning. We'll focus more on delicensing. Now part of this liberalization, privatization, this has, the IPR was focusing on delicensing. Dereservation. Opening up sectors for privatization of PSUs, opening up sectors for private. Reforming the MRTP law. Then initiatives for small sector enterprise. This is your IPR 1991 in brief. Provisions of FERA Act, we have to read by Onno. See, I will discuss FERA Act in planning. See, when we discuss planning, we will discuss the different 5-year reforms, the 5-year plans. There we will discuss FERA. Few portions I have kept there in the disinvestment and privatization, the whole debate, the FERA and the FEMA law, they have been kept there. You will not have much to discuss in planning, so those portions we will be discussing there. So these were the major things happening under IPR 1991. Now see, this is the complete revision. Broader reform, broader industrialization was happening under this. This is your structure. This structure has these implications. We have all written down this. This is provided to you in your PPT. This we had written down. The industrial development and what were the shortcomings in the whole period from 51 to 91. On top of that, you had these things happening in the economy. You had the BOP crisis. This led to the LPG reform, which was also a part of the IMF conditionalities. One of the part of the reform was your Industrial Policy Resolution 91, opening up the industries. I had also told you how industries was kept by the Prime Minister himself, so he would not have to face any friction from any of the cabinet ministers. Narasimha Rao ने खुद अपने पास रखा था industries portfolio because he wanted to liberalize and open up the private sector in a very huge number. And what were the reform measures? Delicensing. I'll repeat these things along with features. Delicensing, dereservation, opening up industries for private sector. Privatization of PSU, reducing the role of PSUs. Reforming the MRTP Act, small sector enterprises ka promotion. Any doubt here? This is the complete background of your industrial policy resolution, and this is what resolution was doing. Any doubts here? Any doubts up till here? I'll show you the complete reforms. They are happening under these heads only. Any doubts here? Because last time we were discussing provisions, a lot of you were not able to make sense of what is happening. So I've given you a complete overview. अब provisions, when I'll show you, you can make sense. Delicensing कैसे हो रहा था, dereservation कैसे हो रहा था, privatization के क्या concept था, MRTP क्या था. No doubts? Now see the reforms under IPR 1991. Now see what are the different reforms being done under 1991. Delicensing. Marketization of the industrial economy is the abolition of the licensing system. For a large number and a large variety of industries. A number of activities which have been exclusively in the realm of sector has been thrown out to the private sector. This is your dereservation. Only 6 reserved industries. We will come to this later. Let's see the licensing one. New industries along with foreign investments are allowed. This is your delicensing. बहुत कम जगह पे licenses थे, and also this is dereservation, opening up the sectors for private players. See, private players not only bring the efficiency, give you competition, range of products भी बढ़ेंगे. Now see delicensing reform. The industrial licenses required for the creation of industrial has been abolished for all except 18 industry. 91 policy ने 18 industry के लिए सिर्फ licenses रखे. They were security and strategic concerns, hazardous chemicals, overriding environmental and items of elitist consumption. Now, as of today, only 5 industries are reserved for licensing. As of today, only 5 industries. IPR 1991 left it only for 18. Delicensing did not happen for all. Only few industries were kept under licenses. As of today also, delicensing has not happened completely. 5 industries still require licenses. They are alcohol, cigarettes, specified hazardous chemicals, electronics, aerospace and defense equipment and industrial explosive. These are the categories of industries which are included. These facts are important for prelims. You can very well get a statement that there are no industrial licenses required today. That no industry has to require a license for starting up an enterprise. This is not true. There are 5 industries which require licenses. 91 ke time pe there were 18 industries which required licenses. This is the most important procedural impact that happened. Sub registration schemes and registration offices band kare. Exempted industries registration, DGTT registration will be abolished. Freedom to work. Removing the quota permit Raj. Removing the licenses. See, use of market related prices and incentives rather than government administrative fiat for making commercial decisions. We had seen in 48 and 56 under the Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, supply of raw material, quantity to be produced, what prices you should keep, this was all decided by government. सिर्फ लाइसेंस ही नहीं आ रहे थे वहां से, कितना प्रोड्यूस करोगे, हाउ मच यू विल प्रोड्यूस, हाउ मच प्राइस यू विल चार्ज, व्हाट इज द सप्लाई ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल यू आर टेकिंग, एवरीथिंग विल बी डिसाइडेड बाय द गवर्नमेंट. Now when you are abolishing the licensing system, you are abolishing the registration schemes, you are abolishing the offices. That means government will give you complete freedom to decide your prices, decide your production, decide everything. It will all be market related. This will not be governed by the government. The use of market in a very big way. Delicensing is removing all the registration schemes. Exemption, only 18 industries are under licensing regime. Today only 5. I hope this is clear. Use of market related prices. When the government is not keeping your information, registration nahi hai, kisi cheez ka bhi nahi hai, it is allowing free decisions on price, quality, everything. There are no permissions you require. License quota permit Raj was abolished with the IPR 1991 policy. It was kept only for few industries, rest all abolished. Freedom for the private players to do their business. Also policy, industrial policy was being liberalized, location policy, to ensure decentralization of the industrial activities geographically. We had also discussed in one of the points on the industrial structure between 1951 to 91. One of the shortcomings of the policy, one of the shortcomings of the structure was that it was concentrated only in few states: Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. These 4 states have most of the industries. Though we tried to disperse the industries through policies, but it did not happen. So now location policy is being rational behind keeping electronics under licensing. See, electronics can be used for various strategic purposes. Electronics का use काफी जगह हो सकता है. काफी different उसके strategic defense purposes हैं electronics के. To ensure decentralization, shift industries from big congested city to the rural and backward areas. Now what are the different provisions which they involved? Other than cities of more than 1 million, the industrialist will not be required to obtain industrial approval from the central government except for those where licensing is there. इसको भी आप liberalize कर रहे हो policy को. You are doing away with the government permission. Your objective is still the same. To disperse the industries geographically, move them to rural and backward areas. In respect of locations other than cities, पहले permission थी कि कहाँ पे खुलनी चाहिए industry. Now you can see that has been relaxed. For more than 1 million population, industries will not be required to obtain industrial approval from central government. Greater than 1 million industries other than those of non-polluting nature such as electronics, computer, software will be located outside 25 kilometers of the periphery. Zoning and land use environmental legislation will continue. बिल्कुल ही free hand नहीं दे दिया था. These are important. These can be asked, these type of statements. I've included these features so that you get the prelims question correct. These things can be asked in prelims. Now role of public sector, limiting the role of public sector are to be vacated by them. This is privatization. जो जहां पे भी जो काम नहीं करने चाहिए, they will be removed. It will be privatized. The PSU will be privatized. Government will not open up new sectors. Privatization is nothing but opening up the PSU to private players, giving the ownership and management to the private players. Equity control government 51% से कम कर लेता अपना. That is privatization. Giving the management and ownership control to the PSUs. To the private sector. We'll discuss privatization and disinvestment in detail. Disinvestment mein some of the shares are given. Ownership and management control are not. That still remains with the government. Privatization mein the management ownership control is given to the private players. Kahan pe it will be vacated? The 6 industrial units which the public sector took over and accounts for 1/3 of the total losses of CPSUs. Loss-making PSUs. Second, public enterprises quite large, many in numbers, which engage in producing consumer goods and services. They do not fit into the original. Now, when you are doing industrialization through the PSUs, you were producing all type of goods. Like I gave you an example, modern bread, scooters, everything was being produced by PSUs. We don't require PSUs to be performing those functions. हमने commanding heights of economy PSUs को किस लिए बनाया? So that they can direct the investment in certain direction. Creating breads, watches, scooters was not that function of the PSU to direct the investment. So they will escape from the areas of these producing consumer goods and services. Existing portfolio ka there will be a review. This is very important point, that there will be review that where there is small scale non-strategic areas, inefficient and unproductive areas, areas with little social consideration and where private sector has developed sufficient expertise and resources, yahan se wo niklenge. This is limiting the role of public sector. In the first reform we talked about de-licensing. प्राइवेट सेक्टर को इंडस्ट्री खोलने के लिए लाइसेंस नहीं चाहिए होंगे. All the registration schemes were being abolished. In the second, we are limiting the role of public sector. We also talked about limiting the liberalization of the location policy. No government permission required to open industries. Then limiting the role of public sector where they will be leaving, vacating, where all loss-making PSUs, producing consumer goods and services, also they will review the working, where these considerations have worked, we will move out. There are certain areas where they are going to stay, which are important for, there are few priority areas where they are going to stay. Few priority areas where we require the presence of public sector because it covers essential infrastructure, exploration and exploitation of oil and mineral, technological development, building of manufacturing capacities in areas which are long-term run development important. See, we have discussed public sector enterprises in detail. So wahan pe we've seen there is a logic that at some places you need public sector enterprises. Because individual private sector cannot do the development, or individual private sector will not come there and develop. Some are strategic defense reasons where you need public sector only. You cannot trust the private sector. For welfare objectives, you need the public sector. Plus they are important for long-term development of the economy where private sector is inadequate and there are strategic considerations. 6 industries: defense, atomic, coal and lignite, mineral oils, railway transport, minerals relating to atomic energy. और आज सिर्फ 2 ही रिजर्व हैं, एटॉमिक एनर्जी और रेलवे. Reservation only 6. At that point of time, 1991, today we have only 2 which are reserved for the public sector, that is atomic energy and railway operations. This you would know, हमने public sector पे काफी लंबा discussion किया था last time, so you would know that they are important to keep in certain areas. Reform in the PSUs. See, first was moving out vacation, moving out from areas where they are not suitable, they are loss making, and also review of their working in certain areas, wahan bhi vacate honge. One is privatization. Second is where they have to stay in certain strategic important industries which are important for long-term development of the economy. There were 6 sectors which were reserved. As of now, only 2 are there. Third is your improvement of the public sector. We talked about the problems in public sector of record, that is the interference by the ministry, interpolitical interference. Also, there was no specific strategic policy they have. They do not have complete control over their manpower. Personal management भी बहुत poor है. Railway is going to private. See, operations, कुछ एक एस्पेक्ट्स प्राइवेट किए हैं, ऑपरेशन स्टिल लार्जली इन द हैंड ऑफ पब्लिक. कौन सी ट्रेन किस ट्रैक पे चलेगी वो अभी भी प्राइवेट नहीं डिसाइड कर सकता. रेलवे ऑपरेशंस आर स्टिल अंडर पब्लिक हैंड्स. Enterprises more growth oriented and technically dynamic. Now we are talking about the reforming of the PSUs. This is the most important reform, the MOU system. There are two reforms which are being done here. One is disinvestment, listing of the PSUs, giving out share to the larger public. The moment you disinvest certain stake, see disinvestment और privatization में फर्क ये है that disinvestment you will keep the management ownership control with yourself but also provide wider ownership to the public. कुछ 2-4%, 10%, 20% आप disinvest करोगे, you will list them on the stock market. This will ensure that you are properly under the market discipline. जब listing होती है तो market का एक sense of market discipline is enforced on you. In privatization, the management ownership control is in the hands of private. Management and ownership goes in the hands of the private. Here, disinvestment, only a few shares are given to the larger public. And the moment you list yourself in the stock market, there is a sense of market discipline. So there are two reforms. One is disinvestment and the other is MOU system. The third is extending the jurisdiction of the MRTP Act to the public enterprises. Before 1991, MRTP Act did not apply to the public sector units. सिर्फ private पे applied था ये MRTP. Now MRTP will also apply on the public sector enterprises. See, what is the MOU system? Please understand what is the MOU system. This is a good reform you can mention for PSUs. Now, Memorandum of Understanding. जो ये गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट के अंडर PSU है, they will sign a memorandum of understanding. This will list out the goals to be achieved. And memorandum of understanding is being signed between the government department and the PSU that this is what we are going to achieve. Now this ensures that this PSU now has complete operational freedom. Day to day jo we talked about interference from the ministry will not happen. Because everything you have given them under this MOU, they have signed an MOU that this is what we are going to achieve this year. This MOU becomes the basis of accountability. Strategic investment and disinvestment. See, we will talk about strategic disinvestment and disinvestment in detail. इनका मतलब कैसे बदल गया है, पहले क्या था? We will talk about all this when we talk about disinvestment and privatization. So you see, PSUs now will be free from the daily interference of the government department. They are signing an MOU that this is the goals we are going to achieve in 1 year. They get complete operational freedom to achieve these goals. This MOU also forms the basis of accountability and performance from the PSU. अब गवर्नमेंट असर्टन कर लेगी कि आपने परफॉर्म किया है कि नहीं किया है. गवर्नमेंट के तरफ से you are getting this accountability of performance. PSUs are getting complete operational freedom to work. A memorandum of understanding is signed between the PSU and the concerned government department that this is what we are going to achieve. This will free them from the daily political interference of the ministry. जो एक big problem we had discussed, the lack of strategic vision and everything, this will be controlled up to certain extent because this MOU is defining all the things. This is a very important reform in public sector management. MOU system is a very good reform. इसका implementation इतना अच्छा नहीं हो, but it was still a very good system to ensure operational freedom to the PSUs, freeing them from the day-to-day interference of the ministry, which is a very big problem of the government PSUs. So this was included in the IPR 1991. IPR 1991, privatization of the loss-making PSUs. Few areas they are going to stay. The areas have been designed, 6 industries where they will stay. Today there are only just 2 industries left. where it is completely reserved for the public sector, no private player is allowed. Second, the third, the reforms of the public sector, yes. One is your MOU system, the other is disinvestment, opening up them to the market discipline, because whenever you are disinvesting, you are going to list the company on the stock exchange. वहां पे ट्रांसपेरेंसी नॉर्म्स होते हैं, you have to maintain everything, you have to show the reports. So certain sense of market discipline will be enforced in the form of disinvestment. Then the MOU system, and the third was your MRTP Act on the public sector. Another important component is liberalization of your foreign investments. Foreign investments were being liberalized. Earlier, maximum 40% of equity was that private player could take in a domestic industry. कोई भी industry में 40% maximum ownership ले सकता था private foreign player. And also it was case by case basis. Approval was case by case basis, not automatic. Now again you are liberalizing it. You are increasing the amount. Approval will be given for up to 50% foreign equity. See 50%, 51% का ये logic है that 51% gives you the management and ownership control. More than 50% now you have management ownership control. Privatization is of PSUs means more than 51% is now with private. Government is less than 50. The logic of 51 is that you are giving the management and ownership control. When we privatize PSU, that means we are reducing the government share less than 50%. More than 51% with any player, that will give you, sir, MOU can be signed between two businessmen. See, memorandum of understanding could be signed between any two players. वो सिर्फ एक memorandum of understanding है कि दोनों साइड agree करती हैं कि ये principles हैं. MOU can be signed between any. But here in context of public sector reform, MOU was between the government department and the PSU to ensure that PSU has operational freedom to work and government department has accountability for its performance through that MOU. Day-to-day interference control हो जाएगी. Now the logic of 51% is that it gives management and ownership control. So now you are liberalizing the foreign investments. Foreign trading companies को भी large scale पे involve करना था because we wanted to increase exports. In the earlier regime, exports were not promoted और imports जरूरी थे करने. That is why we faced a crisis, because imports were increasing so much. Exports हम करते नहीं है इतना. We faced a shortage of foreign exchange. When you are importing so much, not exporting that quantity, from where are you going to get foreign exchange? Also you have curtailed foreign investments. एक तो आप export से कुछ foreign exchange earn करते. Secondly, if there would have been certain amount of foreign investment, you would have earned. Both are not allowed. Exports are not so liberal. Even foreign investments are not allowed. Maximum 40%, and that too on case to case basis. Most of the times it was not being accepted. So that is why you faced a shortage. Now you are trying to liberalize. You are trying to increase imports. You are trying to increase investments, allowing foreign trading companies also to come here. A special empowered board would be constituted to negotiate with a number of large international firms and improve direct foreign investment in select areas. Approvals automatic होने लगे. If you see the FDI regime today, the foreign investment regime today, and you see the controls we have done, more than 75%, 100% FDIs we are allowing. In so many sectors we are allowing 100%. Automatic, not on a approval basis. All this liberalization started with 1991. And if you see the FDI limits and FDI approvals, most of them have more than 50%, 75%, 100% in so many sectors. You've completely opened up in so many sectors. Also they are automatic. They don't want government for approvals also. It all started here. 51%. in high priority and high technology industries. ये दोनों इंडस्ट्री मेंशन की थी पॉलिसी ने, लिस्ट निकाली थी उन इंडस्ट्रीज की अंडर विच दिस 51% will be allowed. Approval automatic in industries such as metallurgical, boiler, steam, a range of industries where automatic approval is there. You don't have to go through the ministry. Automatic approval. Now see the MRTP. एक लॉ यहां पढ़ रहे हैं, एक प्लानिंग में पढ़ेंगे. It's easy to understand. Don't worry कि कुछ मिस हो जाएगा. See, what is MRTP doing? MRTP is to control monopolies and restrictive trade practices so that the consumer does not get exploited. कुछ merger acquisition ऐसा ना हो so that number of players are getting reduced. Competition control कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर MRTP से. And we are trying to increase competition, not decrease it. Now, what was the policy regime of MRTP? Assets more than 100 crores were required to seek government's prior approval in respect to number of activities such as expansion of existing firms, establishment of new undertakings, mergers, amalgamations and takeovers. कुछ भी नया करना है आपको, you will have to take the government's permission. Even for appointment of certain directors of these companies, you need permission. Detail out in brief the meaning of liberalization. See, liberalization is nothing but having a liberal regime restricting the government regulation. जो highly controlled government regulation था IPR 1956 का, that is your liberalization only. Removing those restrictions, allowing the sectors to grow, removing the government regulations, that is liberalization. Why do we say right now the farm laws are trying to liberalize the agricultural markets? Because we are trying to remove the government regulations. Liberalize the sector. Privatization. Privatization is taking away the control of the public sector. Public PSUs को privatize करना, giving it the management and ownership control to the private players. And globalization is foreign investments being allowed, also flourishing of the trade, export, import. This is what LPG is. Opening up the economy to outside world. And we'll talk about this in detail in 1991 reforms. So MRTP में क्या था? MRTP 100 crores was the limit. These were called as MRTP companies. 1980 से पहले it was 20 crores only. The limit of MRTP companies was anyone with assets of 20 crores only. ये हमने थोड़ा relax किया और 100 crores किया after 1980s. But this is the regime was that all those companies having assets more than 100 will have to take government permission for expansion, for appointment, also in acquisition and transfer of shares of the companies. So all in all, MRTP companies have to take government permission for almost all activities. Now this was being reformed by the IPR 1991. This limit of 100 crores was removed. It does away with the concept of asset limit. Prior approval for central government in respect of expansion, undertaking, etc. has been removed. The time-consuming procedures, heavy cost in seeking and getting the approval of the proposals, everything done away with. See, MRTP is still there. We replaced MRTP with the competition law later. MRTP and MRTP Commission was not disbanded after 91. Sorry, with the IPR 91. After 91 to hate hi the because competition law came into picture, Competition Commission of India. Also, FERA was replaced with FEMA in 2000. But इनको काफी radically we had changed in 1991. So you can see MRTP की limit ही हटा दी. Now, eliminating the legal requirement for private government approval. Majorly it was an approval regime. Yes, we were reducing red tapeism. We were reducing the time consuming and the heavy cost in seeking approvals. Approval regime hatake, now it was focusing more on maintaining competition. Earlier it had lost its main significance of competition against monopolistic, restrictive and unfair trade practice. Now see, shifted to appropriate action against these unfair trade practice. Approval centric हो गया था process. Now it has brought it back towards its main goal. PSUs are insufficient and on other hand, ISRO and DRDO achieving heights from their inception. Are these statements not contradictory? This is what we discussed in the previous class. PSUs are inefficient, not all are inefficient. But when you include them in all the processes, in producing all products, we faced a lot of problems, a lot of inefficiencies. कई sectors में अच्छा भी किया, and this we had mentioned in the previous class, the benefits of it. ISRO DRDO achieving heights is a cause. And plus ISRO DRDO तो रखना भी था because these are reserved for public sector. Now they are not. You are allowing private defense also, private manufacturing of defense. But atomic में तो still ISRO is there. Space. Strategic areas. Now new policy also provides strengthening of the MRTP commission to exploitative practices, shifting its focus back to competition and not just approval centric. जितने भी approvals की regime थी सब हटा दी. Eliminating the legal requirement for government approval for expansion, new enterprises, merger, amalgamation, takeover will also be repealed. Acquisition and transfer of shares will be incorporated in Companies Act. So you see MRTP is being made toothless. कि अब approval की scheme हट जाएगी, it will be more of competition. See, when we say PSU is inefficient, PSU is bad, we are not saying all PSUs are inefficient or all PSUs are bad. This we did a very good discussion in the previous class. Extreme कहीं भी नहीं है. So this was your MRTP law. Second part of the IPR policy was ensuring reforms towards the small sector industry. It tries to ensure the supply of adequate flow of credit. See, earlier the system was on focusing on providing them subsidy on credit. But ये नहीं था ensure कर रहे थे कि adequate flow हो. So now the reform is that it is trying to move from only subsidy of credit to providing them adequate flow of credit. Select industries in large clusters which will be provided financial support by SIDBI. Small Industries Development Bank of India, 1989 में establish हुआ था ये SIDBI. Equity participation by other non-SSI industrial undertakings up to 24% of the total shareholding. This is done to provide them access to the capital market, encourage modernization, technical upgradation, ancillarization, subcontracting, etc. Equity participation by other non-SSI industries up to 24%. बड़े players का भी equity they can hold in SSI. This will provide them extra capital. 24% equity by outside players, non-SSI industrial undertakings. This is a very important reform measure to ensure capitalization. Non-SSI players को भी अगर they will allow equity holding, this will ensure more capital is coming to them. Modernization, technical upgradation, everything will happen the moment you have capital. Limited partnership is being allowed, which would limit the financial liability of the new and active entrepreneurs. See, this is one form of starting a company. When you start a company, this is one form, limited liability partnership, LLP. यहाँ पे equity definition. See, shareholding and this, I think, capital markets may you will do. Equity is the shares of a company. That is equity. The limited partnership LLP is allowed. LLP में this is what the definition is. You limit the financial liability of the partners. जब आप company start कर रहे हो and it is a private company, this is one form of opening a private company, that is limited liability partnership. The ones who are opening it have limited financial liability. If the firm owes money, it is in the name of the firm. It is not the liability of the partner. This is limited liability partnership. Allowed, which would limit the financial liability of the partners, entrepreneurs to the extent of capital. This would supply of risk capital to the SSI sector. अगर complete liability हो जाएगी मेरी company की, then there would be no difference between my assets and the company assets. Asset and liability जो company के वही मेरे भी होंगे. I will have to pay for it. In a limited liability partnership, it is in the name of the company. The partners have, the ones who are starting the business, those partners, those promoters have limited liability. Legal liability company की होती है. So this was being allowed for small sector. Speedy payments from the rise of products to the SSI. One of the major problems of small sector enterprises is delayed payments. Small sector में बहुत बड़ी problem है. This we will talk in a while when we discuss small sector enterprises. But this is a very big problem in the small sectors. Supply कर देते हैं material बड़ी companies को या consumers को, उनको payment direct time पे नहीं मिलता. Even government को they provide a lot of products. Sorry. The small sectors provide a range of products to bigger industries. Also provide products to government companies, but they don't get the payment on time. So the 1991 policy also ensured that this payments arising from sale of products should be made speedier. Factoring services involves payments and agencies to be operated by commercial banks before they are collected from the buyers by these agencies. Factoring, I don't think you should go in detail. Factoring discounting system होता है एक. You shouldn't go in detail in factoring. But just remember this, delayed payment is a problem, ensure speedy payments. Supply of raw materials and marketing facilities. These are also some of the issues of the SSIs. We will discuss in a while. According to these materials, government will be provided priority. LLP. See, whenever certain players start a business, so when they start a limited liability partnership, they are not liable for what the companies owe. कंपनी अगर लॉस में चली गई, किसी को पैसे देने हैं कंपनी ने, तो वो प्रमोटर पैसे नहीं देगा. It is in the name of company. The promoters have limited liability. This is what a limited liability partnership means. It is the company will owe the money, not the person who is promoting that business. Limited liability. This was being started for SSIs, allowed SSIs to have limited liability partnerships, so that risk is to the extent of capital invested and not the complete risk of the company. Helping them with raw materials and marketing. Now this is the complete 1991 story. This is what IPR 1991 was trying to do. We discussed it in different heads. Any doubts here? These are the different things which were happening. Any doubts in this? Any doubts in this? So you can write down a small note on the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1991. Just give a heading, Industrial Policy Resolution 91. The Industrial Policy Resolution The Industrial Policy Resolution 1991 aimed to create an environment for a progressive economy. The Industrial Policy Resolution of 1991 The Industrial Policy Resolution of 1991 aimed to create an environment for a progressive economy making use of the market to foster industrial growth. It aimed to create an environment for a progressive economy using the market to foster industrial growth. It intends to dismantle the restrictive and regulatory system or it intended to. It intended to dismantle the restrictive and regulatory system It intended to dismantle the restrictive regulatory system and thereby unshackle the industrial economy. It intended to dismantle the restrictive regulatory system and unshackle the industrial economy from the cobweb of unnecessary bureaucratic control. Unshackle the industrial economy from the cobweb of unnecessary bureaucratic control and unshackle the industrial economy from cobweb of unnecessary bureaucratic control. The allocation of resources among industries in respect of type of industries, size of their scale. The allocation of resources among industries in respect of type of industries, size of their scale, and nature of products. The allocation of resources among industries in respect of type of industry, size of their scale, and nature of products will be determined by the market prices. Size of their scale and nature of products will be determined by market prices. The policy also provides an easy entry to the foreign investments. The policy also provides an easy entry to the foreign investments and technology. Provide an easy entry to the foreign investments and technology. The role of the public sector has been redefined. The role of the public sector has been redefined and limited to only some essential sectors. The role of the public sector has been redefined and limited to some essential sectors of the industry. It also focused on the growth and development of the small sector enterprises or small sector industries. It also focused on the growth and development of the small sector industries. Now, what do you think are the shortcomings of this policy? What do you think are the shortcomings? You've seen the features, you know the background, but this policy had a lot of shortcomings. You just understand, I'll make you write these things. What do you think are the shortcomings of this policy? क्या मिस आउट किया या क्या कमी थी? FDI. See, FDI तो already it has started. जो 1947 में जो ब्रिटिश वाला एक्सपीरियंस था, it has now gone. Now FDI is an important component of increasing investments and industrialization. In fact, it is quite a good thing that foreign direct investment is coming and bringing in the new technology and working in our country. तो काफी अच्छी स्टेप थी इसका. It is only limited to few sectors. Elaborate. What few sectors? This is a good point. What few sectors? Not had the robust infrastructure to promote. See, that is, your implementation will not be good. Why is India not industrialized? Because we did not have good infrastructure. But I'm asking, what did the policy miss out? Selective flow of investments. Yes, where? That is my question. In policy की क्या shortcoming थी? Not having good infrastructure is an implementation challenge. That private was trying to invest, given the policy now is allowing it, is trying to invest, but they are not able to because of lack of infrastructure. But policy की क्या initially shortcoming थी? Unskilled labor, not focused on agriculture. Anything else you could think of? थोड़ी direction में you are going right, selective flow. Public sectors of it limited to only few essential public sectors of the industry. No, public sector was limited to few essential, but private तो कहीं भी आ सकता था. So you don't have to confuse. Essential left to the PSUs, all the other sectors were open for private. Private तो खुले में they can now invest and start working. They were not under any licensing regime, not controlled over their functions. Missed agriculture. See, missed agriculture, this is 91 reforms. I'm asking IPR 1991 में in respect of agriculture. Instead of deregulating the industry step by step, it was done in one go. See, it was done in one go. It was this was the requirement of that time. One go में ही हटाना था. Execution not good. No, what is the problem with the policy? Slow investments in strategic industries like engineering, power, machine tools. Lack of capital. Lack in labor policy. China applied well. No. Private sector labor laws were rigid. See, no, not understanding. We have read the features of the policy. What has the features missed out? So industrial policy resolution will not talk about labor laws. Social relations, that are different. Stagnation of manufacturing, but why stagnation? Lack of capital. See, lack of capital is an implementation challenge. कि प्राइवेट के पास पैसा नहीं था इन्वेस्ट करने को, बट पॉलिसी उसमें क्या करेगा? Rigid labor laws, labor laws. See, again you are saying, you giving me reasons कि why we did not have industrialization. You're not telling me the shortage of the policy, what the policy missed out. Lack of suitable policy for exports. Now you are talking. Instruments of check lowered. No. Labor displacement. What do you mean by labor displacement? One of the answers have come, lack of policy for exports. This is one of the major shortcomings before talking about export, is that lack of job intensity of industrialization, labor intensity. We were talking about growth of industry, we did not know how much employment it is going to generate. The IPR did not talk about any type of employment generation. It was talking only about growth of industry. It had nothing on employment. Which sectors will be promoted, where it should create, which should open. No talk about. Very good. One of the answers is absence of incentives for technological innovations. Major IPR 1991 is talking about deregulation. And this we will see, 1991 के बाद से जो भी इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी आई है, they are talking about just deregulating, removing the state interference. They are not talking about the employment intensity. They are not talking about the export intensity. They are not talking about the technological innovations. From where will you get the money for research and development? What is the talk about the intellectual property rights? 1991 specifically, there was only talk about growth of industry, no talk about its employment intensity. Less incentives for raising efficiency. So raising efficiency, to private player we are bringing in, efficiency is coming. MSME decrease because they are not benefit. We will also talk about MSME के साथ क्या problem हुआ. No strategic regional balancing. There was no concern कि job intensity क्या होगी industrialization की, कौन सी sectors में we can create good employment. It was only talking about growth of industry, and private players only came in few areas. Well, good development happened in few areas. Major investment was in petrochemicals. Certain electrical goods, chemicals, tools, basic tools. यहीं पे ज्यादातर investment हुई. Appliances. Most of you had mentioned that few sectors only saw the growth because there was no protection given, or there was no talk about employment intensity that we will be propelling certain few sectors. We will be, for example, India has a good advantage in, say, apparel, textile जो है, clothing में, leather goods. They are highly labor intensive goods. Both leather and apparel. This way we had a very good competitive advantage because we had a very big labor force. But the policy did not talk about that. Sorry. The policy was just talking about growth of industry, deregulating the industry, but not on the employment intensity. Small industries, growth of industry, growth of service. No. Decrease effect on unskilled labor. No. Another thing which you all mentioned is agriculture was missed out. See, agriculture was missed out totally as part of your LPG reforms. हमने agriculture में कुछ नहीं किया था, but as part of industrial policy also, not only you are not focusing on our comparative advantage. हमारा comparative advantage था labor. Any industry, any economy has certain advantages. किसी की लोकेशन एडवांटेज होगी, किसी की रॉ मटेरियल एडवांटेज होगा, किसी का ट्रांसपोर्टेशन. सो देयर कुड बी एनी फैक्टर्स व्हिच एनी geography would have the comparative advantage to. For example, certain areas are well connected through rivers and waterways. Certain areas have provision of raw materials. इंडिया के पास जो सबसे बड़ी एडवांटेज थी वॉज इट्स लेबर. सो इट कुड प्रमोट लेबर इंटेंसिव इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन. It could promote labor industry or labor intensive industrialization, but it did not talk about the employment intensity at all. हमने अपनी comparative advantage ही मिस कर दी. This IPR 1991 policy could have taken the advantage of this labor intensive growth. Neither it talked about labor intensive growth, neither it talked about export oriented growth. It only was focused on consumer led growth. कंज्यूमर एक्सपेंडिचर लेड ग्रोथ के कंज्यूमर को जो गुड्स चाहिए उन्हीं में थोड़ा बहुत होगा. एंड ये कौन से कंज्यूमर गुड्स थे? द वंस बीइंग कंज्यूम्ड बाय द टॉप 10-20% ओनली. उन्हीं के गुड्स में प्राइवेट इंडस्ट्रीज वेल एस्टैब्लिश्ड हुई. एंड दिस वर ओनली द 10-20% ऑफ योर पॉपुलेशन. The major thing was neither it was export-led growth, neither it was labor-intensive. It was mostly consumer-good and also capital-intensive growth. Capital-intensive, consumer-led growth. बिल्कुल भी बात नहीं हुई employment intensity की. And that is why we did not create a large amount of jobs in these labor-intensive growth. And slowly and gradually, we were depending on imports. Another shortcoming of the IPR policy was, since you mentioned agriculture, it did not focus on the agriculture industry link. Again, अपनी comparative advantage ये थी, we had a good performing agriculture. We could have fostered a link between the agriculture, seamless provision of raw material to the industry, forming agro-based industries, textile industries. This link between agriculture providing raw materials to the industries and forming those growth of those industries, agro-based industries, food processing industries, textile industries, a lot of livestock products could have been evolved. But the whole thing missed out from the policy. हमने सिर्फ बात की deregulation की, promotion of any sectors, of labor intensity, of creating a link between environment and, between agriculture and इंडस्ट्री वॉज मिस्ड आउट. सो जो प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स आए ज्यादातर इसी में आए, कंज्यूमर गुड सेक्टर. SEZ and IT park and industrial zone not clearly discussed. Wait for it. अभी 91. Okay, you're saying IC से ये सब they are later they are coming out. Major lease export. Failed to define a proper industrial location policy. That is a good point. Another important point which you can talk about as shortcoming of IPR is that, see, you still don't have an exit policy. We talked about huge industrial sickness. 91 से पहले का जो हमने industrial structure किया, the last point we discussed was high industrial sickness. And the poorly performing domestic industries were not able to move out. So they were continuously facing losses because there were no good exit policies. Being made to compete with the normal players, they were not able to exit. Huge industrial sickness, compiling losses. In fact, exit policy IBC के आने के बाद अब जाके कुछ सही हुआ है. 1991 policy did not talk about exit of the poorly performing private players, or if certain private players come and start a business for certain reasons it could not work out. There should be a bankruptcy policy, insolvency and bankruptcy policies, so that you can move out of the market. ये नहीं कि आप zombie firms चले जा रहे हैं, they are taking money from the banks, eating up the bank's capital and creating losses for themselves. They are just continuing. There was no exit policy talked about by Industrial Policy Resolution 1991. Now one of the most significant is there was no talk on technology and innovations. Who is going to increase the technological aspects of your industry? Who is going to invest in R&D? From where is the money going to come? From where is the money going to come for research and development? Who is going to do it? First is, who is going to do it? Whose responsibility is to invest in research and development? Then the second is, what is the size of investments you require? Then the third is, from where are you going to source these investments? One of the most important component of industry is to improve its technological capacity, technological upgradation. Industries कैसे अपनी improve करेंगे processes को? How will they improve their systems? And this remains a problem till date. Technological upgradation कौन करेगा? Yes, without proper taking view of small, I'll talk about this, not export oriented. They wipe out after globalization as they have no adequate knowledge of it. I'll talk about this also. How are you going to improve the efficiency of resource use? How are you going to improve your processes and give better products? Until and unless you invest in technology. Now this research and development, who is going to do it? What are the size of investments required? From where are you going to source the protectionist industrial policies? See, this was not a protectionist industrial policy. It did not protect the industry. It was opening it to foreign competition. It was opening to the foreign investments. Protectionist तो पहले थी 91 से पहले. When it was protecting the domestic economy from foreign competition. Protectionist was before 91. When PSUs were the only one doing it, private players were not allowed. So when you're not allowing private players, that means you're protecting it from the competition. You're not allowing foreign investments, you're protecting from the competition. But now when you are opening up to private, you're opening up to foreign, you are allowing all type of competition. It is not at all protectionist now. Protectionist 91 से पहले था. When you were reserving sectors for public sector only, that ये सिर्फ public sector बनाएगा. There will be no private manufacturing. So when you are just reserving the sectors for public sector, that means you are protecting them from competition. The only car you are going to get is the ambassador. Private players cannot build cars. I'm just giving you an example. Private players cannot build cars. That means that is protectionist. You cannot import cars from outside. That is protectionist. But after 91, you are opening up to the market. Opening up to the competition. No exit policy. That means the businesses cannot exit. किसी का business नहीं चल रहा तो वो easily wrap up कर दे अपना businesses and move out of the market. I started a business enterprise, started making cars. I started facing losses. I should be able to exit the market. The problem with before IBC came in 2016, we did not have a good insolvency and bankruptcy law. It was very difficult to close the shop. It was very difficult to close a business. There were no mechanisms, good mechanisms to exit the market. And 1991 policy did not talk about it. Often talked about in the first point only, no suitable policy for exports. 1991 said deregulation, growth of the industry, but how are you going to do that? On the base of imports, in the base of exports, it was not. No Indian company got the time to adjust to the surge and no social objective. See, social objective तो हर जगह नहीं हो सकता. Social, but in fact, small sector enterprises को protect कर रहे थे in the sense के reserved अभी भी थे उनके लिए items. But social objective तो पूरा है ही ना policy का. Allowing the private sector to perform its function is giving more incomes, is generating more competition, is leading to growth of the economy. And in fact, you have reserved public sector, that is social objective. Small sector के लिए you have still reserved categories, you are providing good incentives to them to grow. No suitable policy for exports. As a result, what happened was that there were government made decision with regard to personal incentives and no electoral bond was, ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. Improperly defined location policy. कुछ प्रॉपर हुआ नहीं पॉलिसी से. It could not come out with a concrete plan on how as to increase the industrialization of the backward areas. It said liberalization of the industrial policy, that you would not require permissions, that you would be set up industries in 25 kilometers from the area which are non-polluting. But it did not have a concrete plan on as to how you will improve the industrialization in the neglected and the backward areas. Again, concentration of industries remained in few areas. There was no concrete defined location policy so as to increase the decentralization of industries, which the objective was. Deregulation ये किया कि हाँ permission नहीं लेनी पड़ेगी, but ये कोई plan नहीं set किया कि how you are going to establish more industries in the backward areas. See what happened to. This is more of an implication. More of an implication of this policy was that small sector had certain reserved. This is not exactly the shortcoming of the policy. In fact, this is what, when the policy was implemented on the ground, this happened. You have liberalized imports. Right? आपने imports allow कर दिए. Small sector enterprises के लिए you have a range of products reserved. See, after 91 also you had products reserved for SSI. ये अब 2015-16 में reservation खत्म हुई है small sector की. Region based approach, हाँ, it did not have any region based approach. This is, see what happened. This is more of an implication of the policy. This is not what you can say a shortcoming के policy में mention नहीं था. When you are reserving the products for the small sector enterprises, large enterprises cannot manufacture. Now when you have a reserved policy for SSI, small sector industries के लिए कुछ products आपने reserve किए हैं that they will be built by only small sector enterprises. Large enterprises cannot manufacture and now you have liberalized imports. The moment you are allowing imports, they are better quality. They are better quality at a cheaper price. See, earlier you were allowing reserved products, small sector enterprises, market में सिर्फ यही available था, क्योंकि large बना नहीं सकते थे. Now after 91, you have still kept the reserved category, but now expose them to the competition of the imports. Earlier तो small sector enterprises के ही product लेने पड़ेंगे, no other industry was allowed. Now when you are opening up after 91, you allowed the imports and made them compete with these products. Large enterprises were not facing, and lot of small sector enterprises closed down. Before 1991, you protected the small sector enterprises that these products only you can make. So in the economy में सिर्फ इन्हीं के products मिल रहे थे. In the economy, you had only availability of these products. Now after 1991, when you liberalize the imports, they are better quality, cheaper price. The moment they were able to compete, these were closed down. थोड़ा बच जाते ये अगर इनको efficiency से पहले ही compete करने के लिए होता. If they would have opened certain products to these large enterprises, they would have included better technology, better efficiency. But you made them directly compete with the imports, and imports killed these SSIs. Protection was given to them so that they develop. They did not develop. Protection was given कि ये reserve products आप ही बनाओ. This was given. Protection was given to them to develop. In the initial stage, the infant industry argument is whenever any industry is being built from scratch, you give them protection. But वो protection leads to complacency. Protection was given to develop, and this protection led to complacency because they thought कोई कंपटीशन आएगा नहीं, हमारे लिए ही हैं प्रोडक्ट्स. 91 में खोल दिया सबके लिए. 91 में एकदम से खोल दिया, and now they had to close down. Large enterprises still cannot make them. They're still reserved. In fact, all the reservations for these small sector enterprises ended in 2015-16. उससे पहले सही था. At 1991, the range of products limited for only SSI. These reserved products were approximately 800, more than 800. और ये reservation continued in 1991 policy. Slowly we ended. Any doubts here? Any doubts? The major shortcoming of this policy is this only. और ये हम आज तक भुगत रहे. The first two. That they did not talk about the employment intensity of industrialization, and it did not create any link between agriculture and industry. Both comparative advantages जो थी हमारे पास, a good agriculture and abundant labor. We missed out on both these factors because the IPR policy was focused more on deregulation and not about the focusing on these areas. See, right now it is different. 52% small sector enterprises reduced to 17-20%. Right now, COVID के बाद तो there are different other reasons why it has happened. It is not due to this policy regime. A very big factor right now closing was they were already facing blows after demonetization and GST का transition. जो अभी बंद हुए कोविड के बाद वो पहले ही बहुत बुरे हालात में थे because of demonetization and GST. Transition to GST. Now this COVID became altogether the last fatal blow जिसकी वजह से बंद हो गए. Patent and transfer of technology. Yes, you can. This is what is technology. No talk on technology and innovation. Research and development कैसा होगा? What will be the policy on patents? What will be the policy on intellectual property rights? He will add this here. I'll dictate this. Don't worry. Garam pani. Any doubts here? Comparative advantage पे India did not work on, and we are facing the issues till date. After liberalization, when imports were allowed, were the large Indian entrepreneurs allowed to manufacture? No, that is what I'm saying. You are still keeping the reserved categories for small sector enterprises. Import से compete करने के लिए large enterprises could do that. Small sector could not compete with the imports, and that is why they closed down. The thing is this only, that you still kept the reserved categories for SSI. You did not allow the large sector enterprises to make those products. और small sector के जो products थे, you made them compete with the imports because you had opened up the imports. Still keeping products for reservation under SSI means that large enterprises were not allowed to make those products. And the moment SSI products and the imports competed, imports ended this. Scholar also argued India cannot reduce its focus on manufacturing. Yes, this is what I'm saying. We had two advantages. Any industry which builds up, it has to use its comparative advantage as compared to other economies. India had the comparative advantage of having abundant labor. So it could have invested in labor intensive industries. For example, apparel and leather. Clothing में कर सकते थे हम ये काम. Leather में कर सकते थे. It requires very less skill. Low skill, high labor. This is what Bangladesh is doing right now. This is what Vietnam is doing. In fact, Vietnam is moving towards higher technological products now. This is what Indonesia, Philippines, all they are doing it. Labor intensive. India missed out on the whole bus. Government is not focused much on SSI. It is doing lot, much focus to nahi. When will we compete with RCP? See, RCP is completely different. It in fact is removing the shortages. So you can write down shortcomings of the 1991 policy. You can write down the shortcomings of the IPR 1991. First, the industrial growth promoted by the policy was more capital intensive, energy intensive and import intensive. Capital intensive, energy intensive and import intensive. Capital intensive, energy intensive and import intensive. It missed out the comparative advantage of the Indian industry. It missed out on the comparative advantage of the Indian industry. That is labor intensive industrial growth. Missed out on the comparative advantage, which was labor intensive industrial growth. Second, it overlooked the linkages between industry and agriculture. It overlooked the linkages between industry and agriculture. It overlooked the linkage between industry and agriculture. The industries that gained most from the policy, same point only, the industries that gained most from the policy such as petrochemicals and chemical based industries, such as petrochemicals, chemical based industries, had little to do with agriculture. The policy, third point, the policy relaxed the entry barriers. The policy relaxed the entry barriers but did not relax the entry barriers, but did not talk about the exit. It did not talk about the exit of units from the market or exit of business from the market. Exit from the market. An exit policy is essential. An exit policy is essential to reduce the strain on the weak units. Is essential to reduce the strain on the weak units. Is essential to reduce the strain on the weak units, and is also important for new entrants. And is also important for new entrants as no rational producer. Also important for new entrants as no rational producer can be expected to enter a market. No rational producer can be expected to enter a market which he may not be able to exit. Which he may not be able to exit. The next point, which he may not be able to exit. Next, research and development. Research and development makes the industry innovative. Research and development makes the industry innovative. Makes the industry innovative in terms of resource use. In terms of resource use, processes and products. The research and development makes the industry innovative in respect of resource use, processes and products. The policy misses out on two key factors in this domain. The policy misses out on two key factors in this domain. One is the size of resource and sources. One is the size of investment and sources from which these activities are to be financed. One is the size of investments and sources size of investment and sources from which these activities are to be financed. The other is the matter of intellectual property rights. The other is the matter of intellectual property rights. That is The other is the matter of intellectual property rights, that is the protection of invention, in the form of patents, trademarks and copyrights. Protection of inventions in the form of patents, trademarks and copyrights. Intellectual property rights is protection of inventions. Next, there was a complete absence of suitable policy for exports. Next, there was a complete absence of suitable policy for exports. Next, improperly defined location policy. There are no concrete measures or plan to decentralize industrialization and develop the backward areas. Improperly defined location policy. There was no concrete plan for decentralization of industrialization and plan to develop the backward areas. We'll take a break of, we followed process patent. See, there's no specifically IPR policy being defined here. Process patent to tha, but up now when you are involving research and development, there should be a IPR policy in place. That how are you going to ensure patents, protection, registration of patents and all those things. We'll take a break of 5-10 minutes and then start with small scale industries. Okay, so the next topic we're going to do is small sector industry. Small sector what do you think is the classification here? Small sector हम कैसे define करते हैं? How do you think we define small sector? See, only 3 topics are left now in your industry. One is the small sector, the other is national manufacturing policy, and the last is Make in India. We'll start planning. Okay, so there is a question that is there any chance to correct these faults now, especially the first two, or will Bangladesh, Thailand, Vietnam and Indonesia become the next Britain and France, with India remaining a laggard like Russia despite its large size? See, you understand the industrialization, right? You see what national manufacturing policy was trying to do and what Make in India is trying to do. Then you'll understand why we will not be able to become Bangladesh or Vietnam, because we are not focusing on labor intensive growth. And see, these countries have picked up on that. In the initial stages, China was the number one in these labor intensive industrial growth. The moment your labor cost started increasing in China, industries wanted to relocate. India was had the best advantage because it had the benefits of cheap labor. But we did not have the right policy environment, the infrastructure, in terms of connectivity, in terms of power, in terms of, in fact, even labor regulations. And that is why most of them have relocated either to Bangladesh, Vietnam and the other South Asian countries. Have not come to India. India has completely missed out on this labor intensive industrial growth. Now to do that is very difficult. That is why we are doing what is your production link incentive for most of the industries. जहाँ हमारा थोड़ा बहुत advantage है. For example, pharmaceuticals में है. Even we are trying to promote food processing. But वो labor intensity, what IPR 1991 could do at that time, we have missed out on that bus. Number of employees, capital labor, production on small scale. Yes, this could be definition. See, basically, the idea of small scale industry is that output is less, employing less number of laborers. It could be, everything could be true. They do not make heavy industrial commodities good. Why successive governments, including the so-called business-friendly BJP and so many think tanks, realize it? Investment criteria must not increase 1 crore. So I'll give you the idea. Original definition क्या है? See, कोई भी अगर policy अगर investment की हो, industry की हो, it should be stable policy, and it should be clear on what it wants to do. Example, for Make in India, there should be a complete strategy what we need to develop and how we need to develop. Why these countries evolved and had a good industrialization and India did not, because we never had a strategic policy on what we need to develop and how are we going to do it. Most of the Indian industrial policies have been कि हमें state की interference कम करनी है. भैया बनाना क्या है उसमें भी तो ध्यान दो. We've always talked about deregulation. We've always talked about big goals, 100 million jobs, 25% manufacturing by 2022. How exactly are you going to do that? What industries are you going to pick up? For example, Make in India started prioritizing certain sectors. 25 industry sector उठा लिए, 25. How are you going to focus? Okay, don't give me the bookish definition. Consumer goods. So there could be a range of things to define a small sector industry. One could be its small size of output. This is some of its features which you can say. Not producing heavy goods, they are producing intermediate goods, intermediate or consumer goods. Intermediate goods provide कर रही है large industries को और direct consumer goods for finished consumer goods. Double farmer income by 2022 still a dream only. See, this is what the problem with policies in India is. Policy बनाते हैं double farmer income by 2022. कैसे करोगे? We don't have goals which are achievable or which are monitorable. We never set goals which are easy to monitor. Every policy of the government comes with such a goal which you can't monitor. Ab double farmer income by 22. What farmer income will be कि you'll be taking it as the base. और गोल भी इतने बड़े रखेंगे कि वो अचीव होने वो स्टार्टिंग में you will laugh at it के कैसे होगा. And this is true for all government policies. Small size of output, intermediate goods, consumer goods, it is mostly to local markets. Their market reach is very less. Also, you can say that they produce simple intermediate sewing machines and all. Big capital goods nahi use karte hain these things. Any other thing which you mentioned? Yes, employing these are some of your features of small scale industry. That the output size will not be that big. You are producing intermediate goods, connecting it to the larger industry or consumer goods for the consumer. Very simple consumer goods, not very heavy intensity consumer goods. Catering to the local markets, lower workforce and less revenue. Yes, lower workforce is one of the points. See, we will write everything, don't worry. How does government classify them? Industrial Development Regulation Act 1951 was doing it on size of employees, but ये निकालना बहुत मुश्किल था, तो we shifted to size of investment. This is how government classifies them as small scale. This is just a general feature कि उनका output कम होगा. They would create those goods which are used as inputs for other industries. Catering to very local markets, they don't have much market reach. Working with very low technology, low levels of technology. Employing very less amount of workforce, but government was petrol and diesel prices relaxed. From this we can conclude how much political based everything is done. You can say that politics drives economics. Okay, it was a number of employees, but employees were difficult to capture. कोई specific survey नहीं था which is going to capture these employees. Not a good mechanism to do that. So we shifted to a proxy measure of size of investment in plant and machinery. The MSME Act has now been amended. This was released in MSME Act 2006. This also used investment, but now after the amendment in 2020, now it is investment plus turnover. This is how the government registers the small sector industry. Earlier it was the number of employees, but we don't have a good mechanisms to capture the number of employees, so we shifted to the size of investments in plant and machinery. Now the latest amendment, MSME Act, was passed in 2006 I think, amendment in 2020. Now the category is investment plus turnover. Now you can make this box, what exactly is the classification. For micro, investment less than 1 crore, turnover less than 5 crores. For small, you have investment less than 10 crores. See, this definition can be asked in prelims. Turnover less than 50 crores. Medium. Medium enterprises का कोई classification नहीं था पहले. Medium enterprises classification came with the MSME Act. Earlier we just had micro and small. investment less than 20 crores and turnover less than 100 crores. This is your definition of micro, small and medium enterprises. And this is enterprises. That means it includes both manufacturing and services. Includes both manufacturing and services. There are two criteria, investment and turnover both. Earlier it was just the investment. Now what do you think are the benefits of these small sector industries? What do you think are the benefits of these small sector industries? अरे नोट डाउन कर लो. What do you think are the benefits of the small sector industries? The turnover is how much business it is doing. What are the benefits? More employment opportunity. Employs unskilled workforce. Better. You could better word it. Large employment, okay. Anything else? Employment सबने mention कर दिया. Large employment, unskilled. Logically to create more employment, but practically it failed. No, it has not failed. Potential for large employment. Ecosystem and good chain supply, good. Linkage to big sectors, yes, nice. Requirement of less capital. Related to your employment intensity. Provide opportunity for entrepreneur, nice. Earning foreign exchange, very good. So most of you are getting it right, but the थोड़ा relate करना पड़ेगा. How? See, it creates one of the benefits. I'll make you write down all these. Just understand. One of the benefits of small scale industry is its employment potential at low capital cost. See, employment potential तो सारी industry का है. What you are mentioning, that employment potential gives you large, that is true for all industry. What is beneficial for small sector is that it is providing employment at low capital cost. You are creating employment at low capital cost, very less amount of capital and a large amount of job creation. Suitable, poor section, poverty alleviation, local demand, skilling workforce, availability of essential things at suitable prices, good. Freedom of work, diversified products in different region demands, nice. Non-standardized, suitable for non-standardized, has 25%. So benefits we are talking about, first and foremost important here is employment potential at low capital cost. ये बड़ी industries का नहीं है. Why we are saying capital intensive is not what we want. Capital intensive हुआ, that means capital intensive industry, you are not absorbing labor. Small sector का यही benefit होता है कि that they can provide you employment generation at low capital cost. They employ more labor. They are labor intensive and not machine intensive. Less capital intensity means this. They are not capital intensive, less. Promotion to local art and craft, yes, one of the points. Another point which most of you have mentioned is it provides local entrepreneurship development. Opportunity for talent, lesser industrial disputes. It develops entrepreneurship in backward areas, local entrepreneurship. छोटी छोटी जगह पे लोग can start a small sector enterprise and do business. They can learn how to do business. They can start work on these skills. Providing entrepreneurship in less developed and remote areas. Now what do you think is the consequence of this? Providing entrepreneurship development in less developed and remote areas. Local entrepreneurship. See, large industries एक दो जगह पे लग रही हैं. Small sector enterprises, they provide the setting up these ancillary industries everywhere. It could be in tier 2, tier 3 towns, directly exporting their good outside, employing less amount of people. Logically to create more employment, but practically it failed. See, I will talk about failure also, don't worry. Logically to create more, practically it failed. We'll talk about issues of failure also. Personal contact with employees, rural development, yes. One of the major points is directly link it to the local entrepreneurship. Balanced regional growth. Economic growth with equitable development. That means you are building capacities in poorer backward areas. These small sector enterprises, choti enterprises which are producing either intermediate goods or consumer goods. Easily availability of goods, yes. Another important benefit, again most of you have mentioned, provide intermediate goods. Supply chain efficiencies, reduced migration. Yes, you can relate it to this only. Local entrepreneurship and balanced regional growth, you will reduce the migration. People won't have to go outside their hometowns to look for work. These small sector enterprises producing employment at low capital cost. Financial inclusion, yes, that could be a point. जब incomes आएंगी. Yes, village enterprises, local needs. It can create a variety of consumer goods. Choti different industries can help create variety of consumer goods. Local needs. Urban areas, yes, migration reduce karega. See, these things, equitable regional development, this is reducing migration only. Self-interest, that would be everywhere. Entrepreneurship develop ho raha hai, that will be everywhere. Directly when you are increasing supply of intermediate goods, supply to the large industry, and also variety of consumer goods, you are automatically doing two things, substituting for imports and also potential for exports on foreign exchange. जो ancillary goods हैं, you can do exports also. Women empowerment, yes, that could be a point, but not specifically. Small sector could employ anyone. Requirement of less capital, local art and craft, ecosystem and good chain of supply, yes. More female participation, but that is not directly. Female participation का problem हर industry में, कोई specifically ये नहीं ठीक करता. DPSP, you can say equitable development. Prevents concentration of resources because large enterprises will not there. If you have a large number of small enterprises, you can have entrepreneurship development, balanced regional growth. This will go against BD making, women employment. See, they are very specific. Mostly the issue is this, employment potential and local entrepreneurship. सबसे ज्यादा बेनिफिट यही है, एम्प्लॉयमेंट पोटेंशियल एट लो कैपिटल कॉस्ट एंड लो लोकल एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप which leads to balanced regional growth. Supply of goods will automatically happen. The moment you have industry, वो कुछ ना कुछ supply करेंगे, चाहे high cost पे करे. But major thing is this employment potential and local entrepreneurship. You are expanding this is your expanding your entrepreneurial base, making people do more and more business. Job creators, though creating at a smaller scale. Now what is the total structure? GI based marketing increase that you can mention, local products, local art and culture. Now how did this system develop? Small sector enterprises ka, what was its evolution? In 1948, this is, I am telling you, the evolution of small sector, the government intervention. We had the Cottage Industry Board. To promote the local small scale industry. Small sector enterprises, we had the 19 excess labor force from agriculture, that is employment generation. No danger of monopolistic institutions. See, when you are developing a large entrepreneurial base, that means you are developing business doing class. So monopoly nahi hogi. That is again a sub point of local entrepreneurship development. Cotton Industry Board in 1948, 1949, this was made into 3 different boards. All India Handloom Board, All India Handicraft Board, then you had the Khadi Village Industry, (1948) Cottage Industry Board, 1949 this Cottage Industry Board was replaced by these 3, and these 3 in the traditional sector. Also you had developmental boards in the modern sector. The Small Sector Industry Board, Central Silk, this is your modern sector. Slightly more capital intensive as compared to your traditional sector. Your traditional sector, small sector enterprises are more labor intensive. This was slightly more capital intensive than your traditional sectors. These are your promotional and developmental efforts of the state to promote SSIs. Efforts by the state to promote the small sector enterprises. Then in 1951, you had the Small Sector Industry Development Organization. The SSIDO. This has now been renamed to MSMEDO. The Small Sector Industry Development Organization, this is the main, your policy and industrial institutional development sector. A policy or एंड इंस्टीट्यूशनल डेवलपमेंट के लिए मेजर बॉडी है. Small sector industry development organization for all policy making and institutional activities in this sector, the SSIDO. 1955, you have the National Small Scale Industry National Small Scale Industry Corporation, NSIC. इसका भी सेम ही फंक्शन है, पॉलिसी एंड इंस्टीट्यूशनल स्ट्रक्चर. तभी इनकी आपस में, yes, I will tell you, talk about the benefits, the contribution and the issues. This you can note down. See, major benefit of having this National Small Scale Industry Corporation was to provide equipments, provide modern equipments to small sector. Tools and equipments, higher purchase basis पे. This National Small Scale Industry Corporation. Machinery to small scale sector, equipments, machinery. It also helped in procuring government orders. Another major development here was 1979, the district industrial centers. The district industrial centers, ये बहुत important development था. These industrial centers were one-stop solution for all, getting all the benefits for the small sector. Credit, raw material, marketing, branding, everything. Yeah, I will give you time to write. Okay, पुराना लिखने के लिए time चाहिए क्या? This one. 1948, you had Cottage Industry Board, which was replaced by these boards in 1949. The All India Handloom Board, All India Handicraft, Khadi Village Industry Board for the traditional sector. 3 more. Total of 6 boards were made for development and proportional. 1951 में you had this policy body, the SSIDO, the Small Sector Industry Development Organization. This is now the MSMEDO. Renaming हो चुकी है इसकी. So this is the first part. 1955 you had the National Small Scale Industry Corporation, the NSIC. Previous slide. See, I will be discussing the benefits. I'll dictate the benefits to you. You just write down the evolution of state intervention or the facilities created by the state. You have 6 boards: handloom, handicraft, Khadi Village, small sector, center, silk and coir board. 1951 you have the Small Sector Industry Development Organization, the SSIDO, for all policy and institutional matters related to the small sector. Modern sector में last board है coir board. Center silk board के बाद है coir board. Sixth board is this. What's written above 6 boards is cotton industry. This is promotional and developmental efforts by the state. Promotional and developmental efforts of the state in the small sector. See, Dairy Development Board, these things also came up. This is different. ये भी ऐसे तो डेवलपमेंटल बोर्ड्स बहुत हैं, हॉर्टिकल्चर प्रोडक्ट्स के बहुत डेवलपमेंटल बोर्ड्स हैं. 1951 Small Sector Industry Development Organization for all policy and institutional development matters for small sector. 1955 you have the National Small Scale Industry Corporation, provide equipments, machinery to the small sector. Can we write the textile sector also in shortcomings? सी वी द थिंग इज 1991 ने कोई स्पेसिफिक सेक्टर नहीं बताए थे, वो इवेंचुअली हो गया कि उन्हीं सेक्टर में डेवलपमेंट होगी विच वर कंज्यूमर गुड्स डिमांड रिलेटेड. This is which happened as an implication, but it did not focus on any few sectors. It was major focus was deregulation that involved private, involved foreign investments. Eventually हुआ क्या, कुछ ही sectors में investment हुई, private sector development हुई. It missed out on textile sector, it missed out on the agriculture industry link. इसलिए तो नहीं बना because we did not focus on textile sector and other agro-based industries. National Small Scale Industry Corporation, NSIC, providing equipments and machinery. Also making them procurement orders, government orders. 1979, this is important. District Industrial Centers. This is one center which will help you provide credit for marketing, for training, and for raw material. सारे one stop center for all, getting all benefits, credit related, marketing related, training related. One agency providing assistance facilities related to different matters. The district industrial centers. This was one of the major interventions. Then came another major intervention in 1989, was the creation of Small Industry Developmental Bank, the SIDB. This is assisting in credit delivery mechanism. This developmental bank is helping in all aspects of credit delivery to small sector. (1989) SIDB, Credit Delivery Mechanism, the Small Industries Developmental Bank of India. The Small Industries Developmental Bank of India. Then another major development, 2006, was your legislative framework, that is the MSME Act. Here properly it is trying to define what are MSMEs, enabling policy environment, framework for developing and enhancing competitiveness, ensuring flow of credit, procurement by government, everything is being discussed under this act. This is now a complete legislative mechanisms to deal with development of the MSME sector. These are some of the evolution of the state intervention. See, apart from that, there were few others also, like schemes and everything. Major institutional developments are this. Institutional developments in the small sector are these. Central Silk and Coir Board, they are different. You can note down these. तीन ट्रेडिशनल थे, तीन मॉडर्न. The three modern were Small Scale Industries Board, Coir Board and Central Silk Board. Then NIC in 1955. The SSIDO. The SSIDO is 1954. This is 1954, sorry. You can correct SSIDO, that is 1954. See, district industry center are still existing. In fact, these are quite important, providing this one-stop solution for all the government efforts in SSIs. Small sector changes after 1991 we have already discussed. Providing them equity from outside, ensuring credit flow. All these things we have already discussed under 1991 also. Apart from this, there were a lot of government schemes and programs, but institutional developments in small sector are these only. Institutional development. Any doubts here? I don't think this is just factual information. I hope you have noted it down. Now, what do you think are the issues with this sector? What do you think are the different issues with this sector? Is it really myth that MSMEs are employment generators? So we always hear that MSME is an employment generator. See, the point is they generate an employment, but the employment is at low capacity. After some time, they should expand. They have capacity to generate more employment. They should expand their activities. The point is they remain small. Their potential of generating employment gets stuck. Initially, when you're opening up a small sector, you are providing employment. That is why the benefit I had mentioned was that benefit was employment potential at low capital cost. The point is if you remain small and you do not expand, then you are missing out on this employment now. To create further employment, you need to expand. You need to grow into a medium, into a larger industry. That they do not do. So initially when they are set up, this employment potential is good at low capital cost, but they reach this potential very quickly. And then when they do not expand, they are not creating employment. That is why when we were saying previously that employment generation is a myth, this is a myth because initial employment create karte hain, uske baad they are not able to expand and create further employment. And that is why we have a problem of dwarf firms. We have large number of small sector industries which reach their potential very quickly. And then they do not expand, they cannot create further employment. This is the problem of employment in small sector. Initial, yes, low capital cost pe they are providing employment. But when they are not expanding, they are curtailing their further growth of jobs. आंसर्स बहुत सारे लोगों के आने लगे हैं. So issues, let's start with the first basic one. The first basic issue is due to rigid labor laws, a lot of reasons they don't expand. Difficulties in yes. The first and the foremost problem is they do not get capital. Employment is not secure, that is one of the reasons, yes. Employment is precarious. Informal ज़्यादा है small sector में, formal नहीं है. Their reach is limited to local areas. Let us go one by one. Poor technology, less innovation, yes. Lack of capital. The first and the foremost important point is they don't get credit. Lack of finance and credit. Now this has many issues. First, क्यों नहीं मिलता? Because they don't have, you could say, a proper maintenance of records. They're mostly in the informal nature. Informal nature of enterprises, इनका credit history कैसे बनेगा? How will the bank trust them? How will the bank trust them? High tax slab, less use of machine, rich capitalists make firms to take benefits and real startup will have logo. No, this is not happening. Benefits के लिए कोई भी छोटा नहीं रखता. Informal, see, benefits के लिए रखता है, but not being used by rich capitalist. Credit history, there are no proper maintenance of records because most of the small sectors, they work as informal enterprises. Registration नहीं है कहीं पे भी. They do not maintain records. So when you don't have any records, how is the bank able to rely on you and provide you certain loan? Another point is, they are small, they don't have any collateral to give. They don't have any collateral. किस behalf पे आपको लोन मिले? आपकी credit history नहीं पता, you are a small unit working on informal basis, bank will not risk you a loan. Also, the need is more of operational credit. यहाँ पे operational credit ज़्यादा चाहिए. And not financial credit. Financial credit is mostly to expand, to get in more technology. MSME small sector के साथ problem ये होती है that they sell their certain product, they are not getting the payment on time. So they need operational credit to do their day-to-day functions because their payments are always delayed. A very big component is of the MSME sector is thus operational credit is very important here. क्योंकि पेमेंट टाइम पे नहीं हो रही. Okay, so this I am going to dictate. Only you had to write about the institutional structure for MSME development, the benefits and the issues I'll dictate. Answers बहुत जगह आ रहे हैं, but let us discuss them in detail. Informal nature credit history is not there, they don't have collateral, also they need more of operational credit. What do we mean by operational credit is your day-to-day needs, day-to-day capital needs because you are not getting payments on time. Whatever products you are getting, whatever raw material you are sourcing, पूरा chain में it is operational, bill चलता है. Payment is not on time. And that is why there is more need of operational day-to-day credit and not on financial credit. Financial credit is to expand. You take a bank loan to expand your activities, to get in more technology. If you are buying a new machine, problem MSME sector की ये है कि they are needing of more operational credit, which is not very easily available because of lack of these things. Another point which is an issue with the small sector enterprises is your infrastructure constraints. अब ये backwards area में है, local areas where they are not able to get the basic facilities. अब इसमें the biggest concern is your lack of logistics, transportation, road, power. Logistics becomes a concern. Transportation. When you are opening these industries in regional backward areas where there is not much of development and these small sectors employing very less number of people, इनकी कोई इतनी political backing भी नहीं बन जाती that other infrastructure starts getting created. Power facilities is very big concern. और इसकी वजह से इनकी logistics cost बढ़ जाती है. Since they are working on very small scale, they cannot use say railways or waterways to transport their goods. Now these things, transportation power, they'll be relying on generators. This adds to the cost. Transportation, again roads, tempos, और वो भी इतने अच्छी क्वालिटी में नहीं है, तो logistics cost increase because of poor infrastructure. The whole reason is because they are in remote locations. Transportation cost increases. They have to use roads. They have to use less efficient transportation mechanisms. Because they are working on small scale, working out of remote locations, they cannot use the most efficient transportation such as railways. Logistics is movement of goods. Official regularly intervene in their business by different means structures. ये हर जगह होता है इंडस्ट्री में. Another point which most of you have mentioned is your lack of modern machine. They are working on poor technology. Now, why are they working on poor technology? Why are they working on poor technology? Why don't they increase their benefits? Why don't they work on better technology? They don't have modern machine equipments. Not getting incentive to increase production. Industrial sickness, सबका एक ही जवाब, less political backing. No, not less political backing. See, poor technology is because they don't have access to finance. How are they going to expand or how are they going to get modern technology when they don't have access to finance? Another important point which one of you have mentioned is, what is the incentive to grow? See, you are classified as small sector enterprises on the basis of investment. On the basis of investment in investment in plant and machinery, you are classified as small. Your basis of investment is how you are classified as small. Now, if you invest more, you will not get the benefits of the reservation. Products were reserved for small sector enterprises. Less R&D क्यों है? Why are they not investing? Why is it there less R&D? Because there is no incentive to increase the technology. The moment you increase, you have more investments in plant and machinery, you will be outside the small sector and you will not get any of the government benefits. Reservation, I'm just saying one benefits. The moment you are increasing your investment, you will lose out on government benefits. So there's an incentive to remain small. There's an incentive to, one is they don't have material. Poor price discovery can be a problem. Okay, lack of capital is reason for relying on it. High exemption required. Yes. Point is that if they move out, if they invest more in technology, they invest in their plant and machinery, they will not get the government benefits for the small sector. For example, government had certain reservation of products for small sector. These products will only be made in small sector. And this was not small. 800, 900 products were there. Another point which is directly related to their output is your poor market linkage. They don't have marketing skills. Good तो बना दिया, product बना दिया small sector ने, but how do they reach better markets? How do they reach newer markets? How do they reach outside export markets? Until and unless they have marketing facilities. Until and unless they have market facilities. Marketing ही नहीं होगा, there is no proper distribution. This is also poor market linkage is also because not just lack of marketing skills, also because of lack of standardization of products. इसकी वजह से they are not able to integrate into global markets. This is one of the reasons why there is lack of integration in the global markets. Because they are not making standardized products. Quality का उनको पता ही नहीं है कि क्या quality required है. Less competition due to reservation and low quality. No managerial. See, no managerial से ज़्यादा is low marketing and distribution skills. Their packaging, their marketing facilities are very poor. Advertising, marketing, कैसे होगा product का until unless you have those skills. And also lack of standardization of products, you'll have lack of integration with the global value chains. जो global markets हैं, that, for example, what are global value chains? Every geography has a distinct product. See, I'll explain you this. What is a global value chain? Consider the Apple iPhone. Phone ka body is coming from one place. Processor is coming from one place. Assembly is happening at one place. Battery is coming from another place. This is your global value chain. A global value chain, every product, distinct geographies, distinct value addition. Every geography has its own advantage. One place is making one thing, other place is making another thing. Now India is kept out of these global value chains due to a range of reasons. Now when Apple is making its iPhone, for example, it is wanting certain product, battery चाहिए उसको एक specific standard की. If your product is not of perfect standard, it does not have infrastructure that it can reach that place on time. See, when you are integrated in a global value chain, your product should be on time and should be of desired quality. Then only you can do this. Global value chain में हर product different geography से आता because of their advantages. It is not built at one place. This is a global value chain. Value is being added at different places. For integrating your country into the global value chains, you should ensure on-time delivery with a desired quality. The reason why India is kept out of most global value chains is, most क्या किसी भी global value chain में नहीं है India, because it is infrastructure constraints, logistics issues, on time नहीं provide कर सकते, and standardization की भी problem है. हर country की के पास अपना एक benefit है. They are producing certain product. India के पास ऐसा कोई benefit नहीं है. And this is why lack of standardization of products means lack of integration in these global value chains. Global value chains में India participate इसलिए नहीं कर पाता because of infrastructural constraints. We don't have any proper product which we are producing of quality at a good price. कोई competitive advantage नहीं है in any of the products. I was just explaining you poor market linkage, marketing skills नहीं है, and lack of standardization of products. This is a very big issue. This is not just the integration of the sectors. Less market influence, less consumer, no motivation. Yes, you can say this, less capital, but still they are doing it a lot. Now, another problem is, see what poor technology, there were also human capital constraints. Human capital constraints, that means low skilled people. And plus they don't have incentive to increase their scale, so they won't scale them further. Low skilled human resource. Incentive to remain small. Why would they do it? See, one major thing, logistics. See, logistics is movement of goods from one place to another. That is logistics. The whole problem was created by your reservation to the small sector enterprise. ये दिया तो था के for its promotion. Reservation to the small sector was given for its promotion so that it can develop a good base, good industrial base. They can develop its efficiency. The problem is it led to inefficiencies. We have discussed how reservation, it discouraged industries for investments. Discouraged investments in these industries because the moment you do more investment, you will not be qualified for the small sector and you will be disqualified from these benefits. जैसे ही आप investment ज़्यादा करोगे. This we have discussed earlier in the before last year. It was all about investment only. Right now we are doing it on investment and turnover. But major factor was investment only. So if you are increasing the investment, you will not get the benefits. Also reservation, there is no incentive to increase efficiency. आपको reservation मिल गया, you're not imposed to any competition. That is why most of the small sector, many small sector enterprises closed down their shops after 1991 because they had to compete with the imports. No incentive to increase efficiency. When you are provided protection, large enterprises cannot build your product. You will have to do it only. Your economy will have to absorb your product. चाहे कितनी भी high cost पे आ रहा हो. But the moment 1991 it opened up, you had reservation were opened up, imports ka competition, and small sector started facing problems. Managerial, technical know-how you can write, no online presence, marketing issues. Technology का तो issue काफी है ही. Also, you can mention one, your policy and ease of doing business. The government policy problem, it is here also. Mostly it is catering to the supply side issues, not seeing what is exactly demanded. Most of the policy interventions in the small sector is to solve these issues. Okay, how to get them payment on time, how to ensure government. They are not seeing what all products these small sector should produce. There is no demand side policy mechanisms. Why do Indians lack entrepreneurial and capitalistic skills? See, it's not about Indians lack these skills. It's a lot to do with the how much exposure they have. Entrepreneurial and capital skills people do have. The point is, do they have all the source of exposure? सबसे बड़ा problem ये होता है, these small sector enterprises, they don't know what exactly what is the demand for what product in which country. What exactly product they should produce. They know how to do business, but if they don't have complete market information, how will they do that business? ऐसा नहीं है business नहीं है. Small sector enterprises, there more than 63 million small and sector enterprises are working, employing more than 1.1 crore people. The problem is that there is lack of market information. There is lack of access to digital infrastructure. They don't know what all products, what quality is being produced. And second point which happens is, even when you have business skill, you should have a product. Especially in industry, you should have a product, and product at low cost. You have business skills, but business skills, you need to have market information. Second, you need to have technological backing. Dictation in next class. What do you say? All big American, European big business started small, but today their brands are known globally. India के लिए भी कह सकते हैं हम ये. Ambani and Adani started small, and now their brands are known globally. Any doubts here? Wait, I'll repeat all the points. See, one thing you please don't confuse, employment potential is at low capital cost. The point is, ये employment generators इसलिए नहीं है अब because after a point they stagnate, they do not expand. That is why they curtail the employment. We need these industries to grow further so that they employ more and more people. That is why we need large enterprises, which employs a lot amount of labor. Small sector will always employ 10-20 people. So कम capital पे ज़्यादा employment है, but the point is the moment you grow, you cap the employment there. You are not adding the additional employment. When they are not growing, they cannot create further employment. These are your benefits. I'll give you data on this, don't worry. कितना exports का है, कितना manufacturing output में है, I'll give data on everything. The industrial structure, the institutional government mechanisms to help this sector. See, first point is they don't get capital. किसी भी business को run करने के लिए you need capital. They don't get capital because mostly they are informally organized. They don't have any credit history. तो बैंक इनको loan कैसे दे? They don't have good management of their books. कहीं registration नहीं है, informally work कर रहे हैं. So bank does not trust them. Formal financial system से they don't get loans. Also they don't have collateral to give. किस basis पे बैंक loan देगा? Their need is more of operational credit. Day to day needs के लिए credit चाहिए होता है. Financial credit for expansion they don't need that. They need more of operational credit because their payments are mostly delayed. Infrastructural constraints, they face problem of logistics. Logistics is movement of goods from one place to another. India has one of the highest logistics cost in the world. It is in the range of 11 to 13% of the GDP, which is very high. Developed countries are 6 to 8%. We waste a lot of resources in logistics, and most of our logistics is through roads. Movement of goods is through roads, which is not just pollution, but also very high cost. Very poor efficient, because we are facing problems in railways and waterways. इनके लिए और भी ज्यादा logistics cost हो सकती है because they are in remote locations. They are not well connected through roads. Power they are generating themselves. Poor technological absorption. One, technology के लिए you need to have certain base. इसमें you can also say they don't have any linkages with university. Ideas तो university से आएंगे जो implement होंगे factory shops में. They don't have any linkages with universities. They don't have access to finance to invest in R&D. Plus they also don't want to because their reservation will go. Patanjali. Global value chain, please provide example or case study, sir. See, global value chain, I gave you an example of Apple iPhone. The phone body is coming from one place, battery is coming from one place, processor from one place, the screen from one place. Global value chains means distinct geographies. Your whole part is segregated into distinct geographies where they have their own benefits. China से कोई benefit मिल रहा तभी वहां पे एक चीज बन रही है. Processor, the semiconductor chip is being made at one place because there is an advantage there. The screen is coming from one place because that place has specific advantage. Every place has certain advantage. That is why your global value chains, distinct geography, distinct products. India mein that will not happen. It's because we don't have an advantage in any of the products. Second, we don't have good logistics. When you are making different products at different place, you need on-time delivery. Because when you are going to integrate, you need on-time delivery. When you have inefficiencies in transportation, you cannot ensure on-time delivery. There's a range of reasons why India is not integrated into these global value chains. GST and demonetization affected more MSME than other sectors. See, you yourself see they are doing work in the informal nature. Most of your MSMEs are informal. Informal means they are not registered anywhere. They are working majorly on cash. They don't have bank accounts. The moment you announce demonetization, cash is sucked out. Pehli they are working on delayed payments. Their whole business went awry. And most of our industrial work is done through MSMEs. कोई बैंक अकाउंट नहीं है इनका. Informally, they are not registered anywhere. Salaries are being paid in cash. Whatever they are giving the goods, they are given in cash. Everything, they could not pay salaries, they did not get payments because most of the cash was sucked out of the system. Demonetization killed the MSME sector. अभी 2019-20 में आके कहीं संभले थे because of this 2016 shock. Because most of it is operating on cash. There's no digitalization, no formalization. Very less digitalization and formalization of these MSMEs. And how GST affected? Now GST, when they are not existing in the formal sphere, they have to make the transition to this formal, because now input tax credit milega. The whole GST system is based on the input tax credit mechanism. You get the input tax what you are paying on the raw material. So you have to maintain the complete books now. You have to file different returns. Now this transition to this whole GST system added to their cost. Earlier there was not maintaining any books. The moment GST got introduced, they now had to maintain complete records, because they will get input tax credit only when they have bills. Input tax credit मिलता है पिछली stage का in GST. For this, you have to have maintained bills of the complete value chain. This will impose additional cost to understand the system. किस पे product पे कितना है, to maintain those books, again filing returns every 3 months. This added additional cost to the MSMEs which were operating in the informal sphere. That is how demonetization and GST impacted the MSME. One of the major reasons for slowdown of Indian economy was demonetization and transition to GST, because it had severely impacted the MSME sector. It is working on cash, it doesn't maintain any books. It's not formal. होना क्या चाहिए, that is different, के होना चाहिए formal, but अब था तो नहीं और आपने ये कर दिया, so shock तो लगेगा. And this is why MSME sector faced a very big issue. No, the present positive effects of demonetization. जिसके कुछ होंगे positive तो ही बात होगी. Even the government has started showing it as its reform measure. Government ये बात नहीं करती demonetization का. Objectives, yes, were defined to control terrorism, to control cash. In fact, अभी कल ही newspaper में आया, cash is at the highest peak since the past so many years. Positives है ही नहीं, because कुछ data ही नहीं है to back that. Can we say that in interview? You can talk about that objectives were this, but we were not very successful in meeting those objectives. और ऐसे controversial question कम ही पूछेंगे. Don't worry, these controversial political questions are not often asked in interview, or plus demonetization is 5 years old now. And even if they do, you said we had certain objectives, but we were not very successful in achieving those objectives. You do not say that demonetization killed the MSME sector, बहुत बेकार था ये सब. You don't say that. Okay. Should we write it in today or next class? Garam pani. Why did they introduce 2000? See, nobody could understand what was the logic of demonetization. Even 99% return to banks. Yes. Again, this was yesterday's news only, that cash is running at all-time high. Next. See, next class we'll probably complete in 1 hour. National Manufacturing Policy and MSME. Effective normal people killed so many normal people. इस सिर्फ impact नहीं था, बहुत लोग लाइनों में खड़े होके मरे भी हैं. Next class में करेंगे यार, मैं भी बहुत थक गया हूँ. Next class. If you have any doubts, you can ask. I'll wait for 5 minutes. See, this demonetization is one policy which cannot be defended at all. कितना कोशिश कर लो, if you are pro-government, anti-government, you cannot defend this. It's very difficult. At max, you can say objectives जो थे वो नहीं इतने अच्छे से achieve हो पाए. Next week we have 4 classes, yes. Next week we will end my section of economy. इंडस्ट्री खत्म हो जाएगा इन इनिशियल 1.5 hours, देन वी विल स्टार्ट प्लानिंग. 3.5 क्लासेस में प्लानिंग हो जाएगा. इनफैक्ट जल्दी भी हो सकता है, ज्यादा एनर्जी कंज्यूम करते हो. Next topic is national manufacturing policy and make in India. So that you have a complete overview. 1991 ने change तो किया, but 91 के बाद 2011 में manufacturing policy what it did, make in India what it is trying to do. उसके बाद से आत्मनिर्भर भारत आया. I don't think that's much to discuss there because government has not provided much clarity what exactly is Atmanirbhar Bharat. But yes, national manufacturing policy and make in India, yes, they can do. See, GST is still good. GST का transition is not that smooth. The point is GST has a lot of good things. But हमने जैसे implement किए उसमें issues आ रहे हैं. But GST is a good thing. But demonetization is something which is beyond comprehension. Like you cannot find any good thing what it was trying to do. GST still has a lot of good things. Implementation में flaws हैं, वो किसी की भी policy में होंगे, and with time they will be corrected. But demonetization, absolutely no. GST has a lot of issues, but they can be corrected. Okay, dictation will happen next class. Thank you.